Is there a silver bullet to make any conversation a better conversation? Welcome to another episode of Relearning Leadership, where we explore a specific leadership challenge and break it down to help improve your leadership, your organization, and possibly your personal life. I'm Pete Behrens, and today I want to talk about the one way you can improve every conversation. Does that sound intriguing? All right, let's dive in. I want to start with two stories that, let's just say, didn't go so well. Two conversations that I had with my partner, Jana, that let's not follow. All right, conversation number one. One morning on a Saturday, I'm writing, in the flow, headphones on, working on some topic. And sure enough, Jana comes along, said, "Hey, Pete, got to talk." Of course, I'm interrupted. I'm bumped out of my flow of state of writing. And I can imagine my response was probably not all that friendly in terms of, what? And, within about 30 seconds, I think she said, "Fine, forget it." And I'm like, failure bow, right? Trying to recover from that was incredibly, incredibly difficult. Now, conversation number two, let's turn the tables. So now it's my turn. I'm coming up to Jana. I'm offering a new idea about, hey, this house is no longer serving us. And, I believe it's time for us to move. Our boys have moved out. We're using maybe 20% of our house anymore. And boy, was I surprised. The alliteration of, whoa, wait, what about our memories? What about, our friends? What about, we love living here? What about, we just redid our kitchen? All these things that were coming up. It was like, oh my gosh, all right, I totally screwed that conversation up. And, obviously it tripped over a wire on that one. So what's going on, right, in these two not so great moments with Pete and conversations with his partner, Jana? Well, what we're dealing with here is the concept of threat. Okay, first of all, in both cases, we've got somebody who needs to talk and somebody who's, for the most part, unsuspecting, right? And this is a way a lot of conversations get kicked off. And if we're just talking about the game last night, or if we're just talking about the weather, who cares, right? Let's not work up a sweat over those things. But when something's at stake, right? When there's something important to talk about, when you're dealing with emotions, when you're dealing with our house, that's a lot to it. And what I didn't realize in the first conversation is Jana wanted to be talking about her mother and her mother's resurgence of cancer. Yeah, that was that conversation. At work, this might be dealing with things like project decisions, changes. This might be dealing with, reassignments and where things are going to be, heavily, involved in, this decision has an impact, right? Those are the conversations that we don't want to have this kind of response. So what are we seeing here? We're seeing threat. So let's talk about threat. Threat is that adrenaline hormone inducing, get the heart rate going, get the lungs pumping for that fight, flight, or freeze response, right? That's that defensiveness that we get when something is coming at us that we don't expect. Now, in these two stories, we're seeing a couple of things. One is, let's take that first story. I'm surprised, right? I'm on a train. I'm in a flow. And what happens? I get pulled away from that. My brain is expecting something that all of a sudden, right? And it's being pulled away, right? This is what we call a certainty threat. I had a certain expectation of what's going on. And, Saturday morning, I don't expect much to disrupt that. And all of a sudden, there it is in front of me. Now, there's a second piece going on there, right? Autonomy. I have no choice, right? This is happening to me. Jana wasn't purposefully trying to break my flow. She didn't know what I was doing. She had a need. She needed to talk about something that was important to her at that moment. Yet for me, that was a forced disruption. That's like saying, nope, you got to be over here, And so autonomy is another clear trigger. Now, turn the tables. Same thing's happening to Jana. I surprise her with this conversation about a house, right? She's like, whoa, where's this coming from? And there's a certainty element there, but let's compound the certainty. Not only is this conversation uncertain, the entire path I'm projecting forward is uncertain. Sell this house? How? Where are we going to move? Where do we go to? Where's our friends? What do we do with all, and so when you're talking about change and certainty, it's not only the conversation, it's the implications of that conversation. And obviously autonomy, I didn't give her choice. I'm saying, hey, let's talk about this right now. Now, what we're seeing is two elements of a framework that I want you to be aware of. Okay, now this comes from David Rock, and it's called SCARF. Now, it comes from the book, Your Brain at Work, which you probably see right on my shelf behind me there. And it's an incredibly powerful recognition of the triggers, the 5 key triggers we all humans, are going to create this adrenaline pumping threat, right? So let's just quickly review those here for a second. The S stands for status. Now, status is probably my favorite threat. I mean, what is status? Status is something where we compare to other people, right? I might be wealthier, healthier, taller, those types of like who am I as a person? But status is also like my experience, my expertise, my authority. Do you question my decision? Are you saying I made a mistake, right? You think of all those things that happen at work when somebody says, hey, I'm not so sure about that, or I don't see the things the same way. Those are actually status threats. Our person, our being, our competency is being challenged. All right, now C, certainty. We talked about that one quite a bit, but think about that, right? Certainty is the threat of what I expect versus something new coming in, right? Think of COVID. COVID was a huge certainty trigger, not only for our health and like, hey, am I going to get it? But even like, are we going to return to work and what's going to happen at work? And I mean, think about all the things that COVID did from a standpoint of, certainty types of triggers. And this is one that comes up obviously at work, especially with agility all the time. A, autonomy. Now, again, we talked about that one. Don't tread on me, right? Give me my freedom. Give me choice. Anytime that we are pulled from what we want to do, we're going to get triggered by an autonomous threat. Like, that is not something I wanted to go. This is true of any decisions that organizations make, right? This is happening all the time. Now, it might feel like micromanagement to you, or it might feel like, somebody is just, treading on your turf in some way, redoes your work, whatever that might be, right? That gets at status and autonomy. When somebody redoes your work or corrects your work, you can think how certainty and autonomy can play together as well, right? When something's uncertain, it often happens because of a lack of autonomy, like a choice in direction, and all of a sudden, whoa, wasn't my choice, and it's uncertain. So these things combine together. Relatedness. Relatedness is the connection to somebody else. So I didn't have this with Jana and I. We're quite connected. We're quite, we've been together for a very long time. But think about what happens at work. Somebody makes decisions that's not in the project. Wait a second. Why are they making this? They don't understand what's going on here. They're not involved in the everyday action, right? How many times the lack of understanding, right? Why is HR making that policy? We're different over here. They don't understand us, right? Why did my boss make that decision? They're not in the depths, right? So relatedness is the lack of connection and context and understanding we have with those that might be interrupting us. And finally, F, fairness. Probably the one my partner Jana is most triggered on, not only for her own like being treated unfairly, but actually when she sees somebody else, women get untreated unfairly, or Black Lives Matter. It's when that equity and equality are being challenged in a lot of ways. But this happens at work all the time. It's not fair. Our group is punished for this other group. We have to stay and work late, or we have to fix their problems, or things flow downstream. And think about how fairness, right, comes into play. And even why do they get the corner office? Now you're talking fairness and status, right? Why do they get the parking spot? So what we're seeing here are, again, these 5 key triggers. So the silver bullet to making any conversation a better conversation is to delay and or avoid threat. Easier said than done, I know. But we actually have a little bit more at our disposal. There's another little trick to this. The brain's fascinating in the fact that the brain has the adrenaline that pumps the heart and gets the lungs going on the fight, flight, or freeze. But you know what? The brain has another chemical, another hormone called dopamine. And the dopamine is a counter force. It's like a counter punch. Because for every one of these threats, there's a reward. We can give status. We can give certainty. We can give autonomy. We can give relatedness. We can give fairness. Each one of these giving, not taking, giving creates dopamine. The feel good, hey, I'm recognized, I'm heard, I'm treated fairly, right? That actually produces a chemical. Now, the bad news is the adrenaline always supersedes the dopamine. Now, this was Darwin. This is, survival of the fittest. The reason the adrenaline is stronger is because in the days of, cave people, pretty much every one of these threats meant life was at risk, right? Whether, the uncertainty of a tiger, in the forest, or the uncertainty of my status being challenged by another tribe member means I'm probably going to get killed, or I don't know this other tribe, so they're probably going to kill me, right? Those are the things that got us killed. The problem is our brains have not changed. We treat everyday threat on all these 5 indicators as if our life's at stake. Our brains don't differentiate, which is pretty sad. And hopefully, granted, some of these could be life-threatening. Hopefully, most of these threats you're dealing with are not life-threatening and something you can work around. Now, so how do you give status? Well, you give status by asking somebody their opinion, respecting their experience, or even just, giving credit to what they do. So what about certainty? Well, it's pretty easy, right? Ask if now's a good time. Be able to let them have some heads up, in terms of, hey, this is going to be happening. Let's talk about it. Or even lay out a plan, right? That gives people a little bit more understanding of what's happening. Autonomy. Simply give people choice, is now a good time or maybe later. That's both certainty and autonomy, or giving them some choice, flexibility, allow them time maybe to explore. I'd like to hear some of your thoughts on that, right? You're showing status and some autonomy and helping them think through, or having them think through some of these choices. Relatedness. Well, be human, treat people as human, connect to people on a human level, be human yourself, show some vulnerability and some openness and some flexibility that you're not, fixed on something. And finally, fairness. Well, fairness is often felt when I think you give people voice and you recognize, you respect them and you give them some space and autonomy. But, also with fairness, just recognize, some of your biases. Treat people with respect. Be kind, right? It's being in that space of recognizing that, equality doesn't always mean equity and vice versa. And what does that mean for different situations? So back to our stories. We were able to recover. Like, our marriage is still intact, and I'm proud of the fact that those illustrations of really poor examples. Number one, I'm not immune to failure, but number two, we were able to recover. I mean, the conversation where I got threatened, within a couple minutes, I went and said, okay, apologize. I was in a flow state, and I didn't recognize the importance of this conversation. It required me to reset. It required me to come back to that table. Now, in the other one, it was almost the opposite. It again required her to kind of step back and think. And sometimes time is a really valuable tool here. And her recognition that, well, maybe she's wrapping up a lot of threat that wasn't really threat. She kind of, rolled things together like, well, we're still going to live in this town. We're still going to be with our friends. And maybe this house can be a great house for, another young family that wants to use it. So, being able to kind of step back from it, give her a little bit of space in order to process that, helped her kind of come down from that threat position. Okay. So I encourage you to start to evaluate and start to look at your threats, right? Pay attention to some of your triggers. Now, the first thing you've got to do, the most important thing you have to do is manage your own. If you go under threat, game over, right? It's not going to go anywhere constructive. You can't manage a conversation. You can't manage engagement if you're under threat. It's just going to cycle down. Then once you kind of manage your reactions and move them more into responses, and you can kind of manage those threat triggers, then you can start to deal and start to invoke and give out some of these rewards to others, that you can kind of be the catalyst for positive change versus the catalyst towards threat. So I wish you the best of luck in your upcoming conversations, and enjoy the journey.